Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first in a series of webinars all about Future Net Zero Reset Point. We'll be joined hopefully by Sul Ali from UKPN Networks, but I'm delighted to say Gab Barbaro, the technology has worked. You're with me this morning. Gab, first of all, I don't know if you saw our results. I'm going to share them now with the audience. So let's just go through our basic things. So this is our week today. So we've got Future Net Zero taking place all this week, so do make sure you tune in, you'll find all the details there. This is our first slide, and I think this really kind of says everything. So we asked you, has the current COVID-19 situation meant your net zero ambitions have been pushed back? And amazingly, and I'm very pleased to say, 74% near enough said no. And the other thing that I thought was really staggering is we asked you, is this the right opportunity for you to follow through despite all the economic pressures? And again, nearly 79% of you said yes. We looked at the question and the whole point of our existence. You know, should net zero be led by businesses? And again, a whopping nearly 79% of you believe that this is what we should be doing. And we're really delighted about that, because that really sums up the whole point of this platform existing. Because unless businesses lead and change things for the better, then society won't change. And I think that's really what we're looking at. And then just some facts. Yes, around about a fifth of our survey, around about 22%, did say they had some issues and some fears around COVID pushing back their net zero ambitions. Most of them were uncertain and believe hopefully it's until lockdown. But as you can see, around about sort of 25% of that percentage said that they think there'll be a sort of delay of a year, and a few of you think it'll be longer than the next 2 years. And finally, who was it that we talked to? Well, quite interesting. Most of our survey was sort of completed by people working in the SME sector, less than 50 employees, and also lots of you in large corporates, over 1,000 employees. Funny, the mid-market sector, not too much. So interesting there. Gab, can I just start with your reactions to those first two top lines, that 73%, 74% believe that this won't put back, which is, I'm really happy to, and also that so many believe this is a good opportunity to act. Are you surprised at those results?
In a way, yes. In a way, no. I'm firstly very pleased that you get an overwhelming response. Part of me, the statistician of me says that obviously the people who engage with Future Net Zero are already positive. So that's the reason for the, positivity. So I would expected it. On the other hand, I didn't expect it to be so positive. And the other thing, the other piece of it is that I'm finding that, as I said in the video, that a lot of people seem to be continuing to talk about climate change despite the coronavirus pandemic being so, ubiquitous now as sort of the dialogue that's happening in the media. And when you contrast that to 10 years ago during the global economic crisis, a lot of the Google searches, as I said on the video, basically for climate change and green, Google searches dropped a lot. Whereas it seems that it's continuing, and some research I just quickly did the last few months shows that we continue to have positive. So I'm quite positive about the feedback.
Is it? Do you think? I suppose we could say that we've been shielded, not using that word in the context of the disease, but we've been shielded a bit by all the measures the government have put in. So the furlough scheme, the VAT being put back, loans, etc. But despite all of that, the survey seems to suggest overwhelmingly there is confidence that this is the right thing to do longer term. And that's the view I assume you share at British Gas Business and Centrica.
So I agree. So I'm very pleased that it's positive, both in terms of large corporates and small businesses, that it's still the right direction of travel. I think where you'll see a difference, where the feedback that you showed around the delay, as to whether there's going to be delay in execution, is going to be on the execution. and who moves first and who doesn't. I think for large commercial and industrial customers where they had employees of more than 1,000, I think this is an opportunity to look at the learnings of this period and the fact that a lot of businesses have got staff working from home. They were able to work from home very quickly. They were able to work in a different way. They've been able to operate despite less travel, despite less cars on the road, despite less carbon intensive infrastructure of their buildings, and they've been able to happily work from home, some unhappily, but and the majority work from home and continue on. So from the commercial industrial space, I think from an execution perspective, there will be a delay. What surprised me was that there's a large amount of businesses with 50 employees or less, small businesses that responded to your survey. And assuming that's the same proportion, then I'm very pleased for that, because I do worry about the small business sector and that they aren't very viable right now until the lockdown is released. And if they are able to get back in action, then I think that's when we'll be able to see their true colours on execution and whether they are still positive.
I wonder whether this does show you, though, something which is, as you said, big corporates have definitely, and I've been talking to many CEOs, including yourself, obviously, you know, the way you moved, right? You'd never have thought you could have moved that fast. Yeah, moving all your staff there. So in a way, has this, and one of the things that came out of the survey was that several respondents said, we were so surprised that our bosses were open to a new way of thinking. And it showed them that actually, when push comes to shove, you can do things that should, you know, normally in the corporate world will take 6, 8, 9 months, a year. You do it in 5 days. So perhaps that is now the impetus to say, let's do this net zero thing, because we can do it. Not that we can think about it and have focus groups, but we can do it now.
Yeah. Look, first, let me caveat everything I'm about to say with, we recognise that in this crisis, it's had a devastating effect on people. Thousands have died, and thousands of families have been impacted. So, you know, it has been very, very difficult. That said, whenever there's a crisis, there is an opportunity to move very quickly. And all of a sudden, the dynamics of leadership change. People act faster, people listen, there's a unity of purpose, there's clarity of purpose. And so a lot of businesses engage a muscle that in the past, you know, is more considered, you know, looking at a lot more stakeholders, a lot more balancing, whereas this all of a sudden gets razor sharp focus. And in that scenario, things get into action. I can't say that probably every business has done the right choices or moved quickly in the right areas, but clearly speed does accelerate. And then also the execution accelerates. Things happen faster, things work more effectively. And so, yeah, a crisis meant that we're able to move quickly, people are able to make choices faster, that leadership is a lot more clearer. There's less noise. There, instead of having 10 priorities, there's 1 or 2. And so therefore execution is a lot easier and more efficient.
I was going to ask whether you think, I mean, I suppose it's already been answered, whether you think the appetite for net zero is there. I actually think the appetite has grown. Our survey seems to suggest that actually this is focus minds to say, do it now, which I think shows, and as you said, you did your Google search, you said, is it going to drop off, the search for green and all of that? I haven't seen that. So if that is the case, what do you think the challenge will be for businesses? Is it just about the money?
Well, so let me answer the appetite one first and then get on to the challenges. I do worry about the appetite of small businesses, because I worry that whilst they have an appetite, they may not have the capacity, which I'll get onto the challenge. Their appetite right now probably is to be viable, get the business up and running again, get customers back, get their employees back, and end up with some money. Now, whether they have enough money left, profit, to be able to invest in discretionary, sustainable direction, buy electric vehicle rather than a diesel, buy more energy efficient equipment rather than the ones they've got right now. The appetite may be there, but I think the challenge will be execution, because they probably don't have the financial viability, because any cash savings, any buffers that were there have been probably depleted. And we've heard from a lot of our 300,000 small businesses, they're struggling because they've had to shut down for 2 or 3 months, and therefore they're not sure whether they're going to be viable again, and that's their first priority. If they can overcome that, the next challenge will be, what is the form of financial incentive or government support to recover? I think the government has continued to look at SME energy efficiency and look at SME viability and provide some more financial support. But that'll be the question: what is the recovery plan, and does it come with any sort of enabling provisions to say focus on climate, or to be sustainable, i.e. build back better in a green way? So that will be that. And then the last one is education, and whether people look at this as just an energy thing, or whether it's more holistic than just energy, and it covers other things as well. And that is also a challenge.
I mean, if you break down some of the things that are not in the story. In the story, I'll encourage you all to read it if you haven't seen it. But there's some data, obviously, that we've just summarised. But some interesting things that came out. And one of the trends, I mean, there were 3 trends, which we talked a little bit. So there's an opportunity trend, and then there's a kind of action trend that people have acted. But the environmental social benefit trend, a feeling from many that they felt that and you're right about, obviously, put aside, and it's very hard to put aside, but to just, if we can park the human cost of coronavirus, the environmental difference people have seen, the coming together of society, the way that we could build a hospital so quickly, the way that people have been engaging to try and help each other, the volunteers that have come together. It can sound as kind of like, wishy-washy. It's that kind of classic thing. It's CSR. But most of, quite a significant number in the responses said they believe coronavirus has created an environmental and social benefit that we could capitalize on, in the sense it's caused unity of thought. Now, we all know that things happen. Like, do you remember 2012, after the Olympics, everyone was talking on the tube, and then that sort of died away. But I kind of hope that maybe this has made us all think, because it's been so devastating. It's made us really question. What's your opinion on that?
Well, so in short, my answer would be that I think it has created pause for thought for many people. Should I pause there? I'll pause there. We'll get back to that question.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, brilliant. I'm in. Sorry about that.
A little bit ropey. I think you might have met Gab personally a couple of times, but Gab, Saul Gab.
Hi there.
Hi, morning, Gab. How are you doing?
Good.
So I don't know if you've seen, I think you have hopefully seen the results. I was just getting Gab's opinion on the major trends before we discuss further. What's your initial reaction to those 2 major trends, really, which is one that sort of 74% believe that it won't stop their ambition, and 79% believe businesses should be leading this transition in net zero, which I thought was very interesting. Your initial reactions to our survey results, please.
Yeah, it didn't surprise me, because net zero hasn't disappeared just because we've had a global pandemic. If anything, it helps you think about the resilience we need to an exogenous shock, in this case a pandemic, in terms of climate change, some of the issues that will be faced if we don't take action now. I think to a certain degree it's helped people think through what we need to do now and to be better prepared and ready. So in that way it hasn't really surprised me. I mean, I think the one thing I would say is that the economic headwinds that are coming our way may mean that we just have to be thoughtful about how we bring people with us in this transition. We did a kind of a survey recently of our customers, and 2/5 of our customers are saying they've seen a drop in their disposable income, and therefore, if we are going to continue down this trajectory, we just need to be mindful of the impact on affordability to make sure that we bring people with us, because this is a mindset thing, it's a cultural thing as opposed to a technological challenge. We all have to change our behaviours, and if we don't buy into that, because we're seeing acute financial distress in our personal lives, in the corporate world in the short term, we've got to be mindful of that.
For both of you, I mean, one of the things that did come out, again, from some of the data was a feeling, and again, it might be counterintuitive to what we've just discussed, but people believe there will be finance available for more net zero products. So taking aside all the things we said about businesses and their survival and all of those things, we accept that. But as you said earlier, and you may have missed it, still where there's change, there is always opportunity as well. Do you think the opportunity will now be for the market to say, okay, if we do release money will be released for things like biomass projects, money will be released for investment in net zero capital expense? Let's start with you, Sul, and then I'll bring Gab into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a UK economy point of view, the government is going to be looking at how it can help pump prime the economy to get it from its current status, and clean investment in clean technologies is an absolute no-brainer. So hopefully, whatever Rishi Sunak comes up with next, I think will hopefully prioritise clean investments, because I think that's where the investment needs to go, and with that will create jobs and I guess pump prime the economy. So I don't think there's a lack of capital. I mean, I think government help will always be useful, but there is an abundance of private capital. If you just look at the investments that have been made recently in the UK, I don't think capital is the issue. I think the issue is making sure that we create enough confidence and certainty for investors in a post-COVID world. And that we bring customers with us, particularly if it's going to have impact on affordability. I think those are the two challenges. I think there'll be an abundance of capital for sure. Do you agree, Gab?
Yeah, if I link it to your question around the sort of the environmental and social benefit, if we move towards that as well, what I think is going to happen that's changed is that I see sort of three main trends that have happened. The third one links directly to the financial, but the other two is, number one is, I see that there's been a big community spirit. There's been an openness that we can do things as a community, which you wouldn't have believed a few years ago. The second thing is, for some reason in COVID, we're actually listening to the science. And previously with climate change, despite the fires, for example, the bushfires in Australia, there were still people arguing about the science. But for some reason, government has led with, let's listen to the science and follow the science. So hopefully that as a trend has changed. And then specifically on your finance point, I think the government are making courageous long-term decisions to say we are going to borrow heavily or print money or do whatever type of financial mechanisms, because we know the long-term effect may be difficult if we don't take action. So this is about taking a difficult choice now for the long term. I think if those three things hold, then I believe they can be transferred into climate change. And therefore we can look at it as a community. We can shift our lens to be science-led, and hopefully the government will reiterate and keep on doing what they're doing financially to make tough choices longer term rather than short-term political choices, which may have been, the flavour of a few years ago.
Excellent. Let's just keep your questions coming in. Some people are saying there's some technical issues. The system is working. I just think we're all very overloaded because, unfortunately, that's the way the internet is right now. Let's talk about something. Moving on from that, I mean, before I do move on, any final thoughts about the survey results from your side, Saul?
No, I mean, I thought there was a phrase around the uncertainty, so it's particularly in the short term, for the 20% or 22%. And I think that as we move into the next few weeks and the government furlough scheme ends and the easing of lockdown restrictions start to occur, I think that's when we'll really understand the economic impact that COVID has had. Because I think all the numbers to date, whether it's inflation, whether it's GDP impacts, it's too soon, because then the last GDP numbers were only the 7 days of March, right? And even then we saw, I think, 2% reduction. So I think we need to watch and see. But I agree with the points that Gab's made, that climate change is not going away. It's a priority. Yeah. I think the difference now is that if the government is going to make big investments to kickstart the economy, the choice that it makes in the next few weeks and months could potentially have ramifications for the next few years. So I think prioritising clean tech investment now, if it's not done now, could potentially close out that investment or support from the government in the next few years. So I think it's quite important, even though net zero is a target by 2050 at the latest, investment decisions now, which will effectively tie up government support, I think it's the issue is more nearer than we think.
Let's move on. Let's move on to net zero itself as a challenge. And I think one thing that I definitely want to talk to both of you about is heat. So the heat challenge is one that's kind of overwhelming, because we all think about net zero as electricity, cars, transport. I had a conversation about IT and all of that. But the thing that's going on in everyone's households is, come winter, on come the gas boilers. Can I start with you, Saul? London's facing a massive change over the next decade, right? To get up to net zero, we're going to have people with electric cars. We're going to have the city transforming, the same as all cities around the country. But let's start with, where your company. The electrification of heat, that's going to be a massive next organization like yours. How do you see that heat challenge?
Thanks, Sumit. I would say, and hopefully if you can't hear me or it breaks up, just let me know, guys, because there's been a bit of fuzziness on the line. But I would say, look, it is a huge challenge. And I think you're right to say that it's probably less well developed in terms of the solutions than, say, the electrification of transport, which I think is a lot much more mature and actually is making greater progress. But I would say, look, from a heat point of view, we've done a lot of research that says, look, between now and 2030, what kind of scenarios can we see? And the numbers are staggering. I mean, we would expect to see, in a green scenario, if we were going to hit net zero, to have something like 400,000 heat pumps connected just in our networks alone. We've got 3 of the 14 networks in the UK. 400,000 heat pumps. We've got about 1,200 today, right? It just shows the hockey stick that needs to occur of investment and behavior change for us to be able to hit that target. So I think heat is a big issue. And I think we as a country need a strategy, a bit like we have with electric vehicles in terms of the road to zero. The government set out some objectives there. There's some debate now about whether we're going to bring those targets forward, but it gave everyone a stake in the ground to say that's what we're going to aim for, right? I think we need the same for heat. There's probably some work that needs to be done in terms of research on the different solutions and the different paths, but very quickly, I think if we're going to stand a fighting chance of hitting net zero by 2050, we need some targets set by government, similar to what we've done in electric vehicles, to effectively catalyze the market to act quickly. And there's no reason why the market won't respond. It's responding when it comes to electrification of vehicles. It will respond for heat.
Gab.
Yeah. So obviously from our perspective, we agree that there's a huge transformation necessary. And if you were to go back 10, 15 years in electricity, I think that, there was lots of work done, lots of scenario planning. And back then, 15, 20 years ago, there was probably no silver bullet answer. And what we have now is a mix of different capability and different solutions on the electricity front, from electric vehicles, nuclear, renewable energy, solar, wind, and others. So when I look at gas and look at heat specifically for the next 5, 10, 15 years, I think we're in the same place as we were in electricity 15 years ago, where you're right, there's no silver bullet. It does need a plan. It does need to look at what the options are. But if I project ahead, it probably is, there's not going to be one answer. It's going to be a mix. So it's a mix across heat pumps, gas remaining a portion of the blend because it's a transition fuel to get us to net zero. There may be a solution around hydrogen. There may be a solution around more air conditioning that does heat and ventilation. And so there'll be a mix of different things. But I agree that there needs to be some planning around what that transition is, like we did with electricity many years ago.
I mean, the thing is that you're a supplier, yeah, and you're a network. You guys are going to have to collaborate much more for all of us to get to net zero, aren't you guys?
Well, we do already, don't we? But you're right. The system we have is a deregulated, unbundled, competitive energy market. The disbenefit of that is that there's no central planning, no long-term investment that ignores vested interests and ignores shareholders. Yeah. The benefit of it is innovation, technology innovation, and people investing in different types of capabilities that aren't part of what the existing, vested interest does, because you're looking at different business models to invest in. So we are where we are in terms of the playing field we've got right now, but there is lots of collaboration. And the mechanisms do exist to try and work the way through, but we're not a centrally planned approach here, which it would be a different mechanism to go about things.
So, collaboration, you've got to do more of it, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say that the mantra in the past is you build your way out of trouble. You put in capacity, which is copper in the ground. And I think there's a paradigm shift in terms of how we're thinking about solutions, where it's not just copper, it's using data and analytics and price signals to create capacity. And I think in that kind of world, you can't really extract value unless you understand consumer needs, consumer preferences. Hence why I think working with retailers of all descriptions, not just traditional energy retailers today, but potentially car manufacturers who are looking to get into this segment as well. Anyone that's kind of offering propositions to customers where energy is part of the mix is going to be even more important. And I think we've demonstrated some of our trials that if you can put time of use tariffs or price signals, customers, if you put the right propositions in place, will change their behaviour to act in a rational way to get the best deal, right? It's not always the case, but in some cases it is, and that in itself will help offset some of the investment needs, because you can create capacity by moving demand from peak periods to off-peak periods. So I think there's not going to be a silver bullet here. There's no question investment is going to be needed to enhance the network if we're going to have a world full where a lot of our heat needs and our transport needs are going to be served through electricity. There's no question additional investment is going to be needed, but we can do so in a way that minimises the upfront investment if we can use some of these other tools and techniques at greater scale. And therefore, I think your point, Sumit, about working with the wider network or the wider kind of participants is absolutely key. And yes, we've done some good stuff. I'm sure we can always do more, and I look forward to working with Gavin and his team on other projects. For sure.
I mean,
I think the point that was raised around customers being customer led, is the answer, and you will always find a collaborative answer and a market answer as soon as a customer's involved. And I think that's where the entry point is always the right way to approach the problem. So at the end of the day, there are two things customers can do. The first one is look at what they can do to make themselves more energy efficient, and look at what different technology is available to monitor their energy, and then look at other different investment choices, whether that's new technology, whether that's new heat pumps, new lighting, new sensors, new changes in behaviour, to reduce their energy spend and make themselves more efficient. And this is the same whether you're a large hospital, a large automobile manufacturer, or a home. It's the same. Reduce your overall energy by looking at what you do to consume energy. The second part of it is about looking, if there is energy consumption left, are there different ways in which that can be green? And in the B2B market is a little bit more advanced than the B2C, where a lot more customers are looking for green PPAs or looking for green certificates and guarantee of origins and other things. And by doing that, by looking at reducing your demand and looking at how you can source your green, you create the market. And so, as was said, there are some large consumers out there who've put in more flexible technology that does demand-side response, takes advantage of some of the benefits from distribution and transmission incentives to manage frequency control, manage their capacity, and start to create value by getting money in from that capability. So the mechanisms are all there.
Yeah.
I think the concern for me is whether we can operate as an ecosystem to get to where we need to get to as quick as we could, and how that collaboration mechanisms work. I'm hopeful that if we're customer-led, we can get there quickly.
But that's the thing, isn't it? We want you guys to get together. All the partners here we have will bring you together when we can in person anyway. But the point is, it's that classic thing. The USB comes along and then Apple decides to create the USB-C. So then I've got to go and buy all things. When we talk about electric vehicles, which is going to be the big thing that's going to happen over this next decade, there's no point you putting a system in that still then has to pull different charging points compared to another supplier. So people are going to want to know, are you guys going to be working together to do these sort of things right now so that we can plan so that it's universal for the customer, that we have, I don't have to have a different card or whatever. I can have one system that works for all of us. So what's your view on that sort of thing?
I think that's a huge question. I think you've touched upon many different things. I would say that it's already pretty well documented.
Collaboration, even though you're all working, as separate businesses, as Gab said, in a deregulated market.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. There's greater collaboration, greater standardization that's needed. And the collaboration for me is, yes, working with energy retailers who effectively should understand the customer better because they're selling to the customer, creating propositions. So understanding how we can help them to ensure that customers can connect and electrify their fleets better. Brilliant. We should definitely do that. But again, I think in addition to energy retailers, there's also collaboration needed with other parties. For example, local authorities. We've got over 150 local authorities in our 3 network areas. Last count, I think 60 to 70% of them have declared climate emergencies, right? And they are all thinking about what do they need to do to enable their residents, their citizens, to be able to make the transition. And therefore, working with the local authorities, the LEPs, the local enterprise partnerships, to understand, what does the network planning need to look like to support their city planning, right? Their regional planning is absolutely critical. Because if for example, Redbridge Council and the local authority there wants to put in this many charge points, we need to work with them to help them understand, where would it be best placed to put those charge points from a network point of view, and how can we create better efficiency? And so I think what my experience of this is that when we're collaborating with other parties, like the local authorities, the first discussion is always about data, which is, okay, UKPN, tell us how many EVs do you think we'll have overall? Because you are the experts. So what we've done is taken our distribution future energy scenarios And we're the first network operator to break that down by a lower super alpha area, which effectively gives local authorities the ability to cut our data into their geographic zones and go down to areas of up to 400 homes, which is the lowest granularity that I've seen of defects. That allows us to have a good discussion that says, okay, we think in 2030, we think we could have 4 million EVs. We think in your area, it could be between this and this range. Okay, let's talk about your network needs. And I think it's that kind of discussion that we need to have with respect to heat and all the other challenges that we've got. So I think collaboration, yes, retailers, yes, but this is going to be a local transition and a local revolution. And therefore, other actors like the local authorities, like motorway service stations, all of these other types of players need to be brought into here, into this discussion.
Yeah.
I agree with Saul. I think, I know he's absolutely right that, and it's a good pushback to you, Sumit. You know, it's not just us, mate. It's all actors, yourself included. Yeah. To bring good. Don't bring fake news.
Bring it all together.
Right. Whether it's you know, I agree. Local authorities, local government, regional governments as well. Large customers, local enterprise partnerships, different technology innovators, you know, original equipment manufacturers, in particular car manufacturers. I agree that it's an ecosystem and that all need to be involved. And this is the tricky bit, because energy is in a transition.
Yeah.
You know, the old business models of how money was made 5-10 years ago is slowly changing. We know it's going to be different in 10-20 years' time. We just haven't confirmed exactly how it's going to transition from one place to another. And that requires everyone involved, and not everybody's got it right so far.
No. It's the Kodak moment, isn't it? From film cameras to digital, that whole thing. Let's take questions, because we've had quite a few. So I'd like to put these out there, and we'll just have a chat about these, guys. You can both come in as you wish. So quick question about COP. Obviously, now we're all looking forward to COP, but do you think we should have postponed it so far out by delaying for a year? It's a tricky one, isn't it? What's your views on that, gents?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to give an answer. You know, I think that obviously people are focusing on what's important right now.
Yeah.
And so my intuition, without having any data or knowledge on the subject, is that we need to focus on what matters now, and safety first is what matters now, and therefore I can understand the decision from that perspective.
I think what the person's trying to get to is, you know, will this kind of have a negative effect on us as leaders in the UK after last summer's announcement on net zero? Saul?
No, I don't think it will. I mean, I think there's still groundwork that can go in. It depends how you use the time. You know, as I said, there's discussions that the government is having around bringing forward the ban on internal combustion engine in vehicles. There's work that needs to be done on heat strategy. So I think there's enough work that we could be getting on with, you know, in the time that's been afforded to us. I think we just got to make use of every day that we have. That would be my approach.
This is an interesting one. Again, from the survey, the homeworking, we're all doing it. Gab's there right now. You know, if homeworking continues, this person asks, into the winter, we could have a rebound. This is quite interesting, a rebound effect of people switching on their home heating and then reducing the carbon reduction savings they've made by cutting travel. So, you know, our co-working schemes where people work in local hubs, you know, possibly part of the solution. I know you've both got offices that you're thinking and re-strategizing how those work. Do you think that could be it? That maybe people work in sort of local hubs, because a building does have all of that infrastructure, which is much more energy saving than we would have in our own homes. So both of you, that real quandary about whether home working actually will in the long term save us energy or not.
I mean, I think my feedback is on that question is that I hear a lot of commentators talk about the new normal, right? And I would say,
what is it?
Including yourself, Samir, I would say it's too soon to be describing what that new normal is, because we're in a world where Our GDP has fallen through, fallen through the roof. Our businesses aren't open, right? We can't even get haircuts, right? I mean,
yeah, you can tell.
Yeah.
Although Gab's looking quite good already.
Exactly. So I think, my view is that, do I think that we're in a new normal? No, we're not. We're in a transitionary stage. I think there'll be elements of what we've learned in the COVID experience that will transfer into the new, into whatever the next normal is. But my perspective on it is that, look, I think that we shouldn't forget that human contact and collaboration is so important. If you look at our business, we've absolutely transformed over the last 10 years. One of the reasons why we've transformed from being one of the worst network operators to one of the best network operators is collaboration, breaking down silos, right? And therefore, I'm all for digital working and more remote working and flexibility. But sometimes when you've got complex business issues, you want to get key people in a room safely when it's safe to do so, and with a whiteboard and start addressing some of these issues, right? And I think, if you look at what's happened in the past, we've been able to deliver really good solutions by having that kind of working. So my view is that, yes, there'll be more remote working. Are we going to close down our offices? No. I think that there'll be more flexibility in the future, but we shouldn't forget. And I don't think we should jump on the bandwagon and say we can do it all digitally. I think there is something to be said about human contact, working together to solve some of the knotty issues. And I think that is going to need to progress, given the scale of challenges we have on net zero, as an example.
Gab, I mean,
I agree with Phil that we've learned a lot, but we're still in the transition mode. So there's probably still some more to learn, especially as we get back into the offices. However, we are asking ourselves the question, maybe we don't need to go back to exactly the way it was. What could be different? So we're asking ourselves this question, what could be different? Because yes, there is less money spent on filling your car up with petrol and going into the office. And if instead of going in 5 days a week, you could go in 3, that would be better for the employee, depending on whether the employee is happy to work from home. But how do we make those choices? Is that the employee? Is that the employer? What is the working practices? And so there may be lots more flexibility that in the past, the organizational infrastructure would have felt, actually, let's stay rigid. We want to have presenteeism. We want to monitor people are working. We want to see them on the desk 9 hours, making sure that they're clocking through all their work. And that now we've changed our perspective potentially on that for some activity for some of the time. The second bit of learning is that there's some work that actually can get done just as well. So there was some new innovation. We had a digital guided survey, which I explained on the interview, where we have the customer showing us with their gadgets around their building and allowing us to do a survey to be able to better quote the piece of activity, whether that's a new boiler or a new connection. And that avoided an engineer going out and driving to the premise. The customer was happy that the information was all there, and that was all able to be done by someone at home. So we're learning a lot. We have learned a lot. However, I don't think we've got to the end of the phase of what is new normal, and I don't think we actually know whether we need to come back in full amount yet to the full offices. I agree we will have some offices. I agree there's still lots of value in collaboration. There's lots of value of interaction, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Let's talk about a question that's come up about our heat conversation. This person asked, will heating go the way of hydrogen displacing natural gas, which is quite interesting, through the existing networks? Or will it go through the way of heat pumps, which means much more investment in updating the transmission system? And I suppose that's the real crux of where we're going to go. Are we going to have a green gas or a gas that's cleaner? Or are we going to go for full electric? Quite interesting having British Gas and UKPN networks here. Over to you guys.
I think I'll just repeat what I said, which was, I don't think now we know what the answer will be, because I don't think any of us think that there's a silver bullet now that's going to get us to where we get to. And that's because
play, isn't it? That's what this person's asking. Because you could use the existing gas infrastructure by just switching over the fuel.
And I think that needs to be tested, right? And I've asked for Saul whether his perspective on that. That needs to be tested. At the same time, heat pumps in the home, in particular, while some businesses may invest in heat pumps and that requires some works, doing that for every home, will be the equivalent of the 1960s gas rollout by British Gas to every home to put in a boiler. That's a monumental activity. So I don't think that either or is going to be a silver bullet until we know exactly which one is more viable economically, what the impact on the customer is, what the impact on the network is, and we need to think through what that transition is. Maybe Saul, you've got an answer already.
Yeah, and look, I'm trying not to give a politician's answer here.
Come on, do it.
I'll just give a straight answer. The straight answer is it won't be either or, it'll be both, right? And the reason why I say that is economics will prevail. So, for example, if you've got communities that are off gas today, right, why would you build a gas network to them? It makes no sense. So if they're going to go from oil-based heating, just put the electric cables in for them. That way they can charge their vehicles as well, right? But if you're in London or in the suburbs where you've got a gas network, and if it can be proven that you could put a greener gas or hydrogen safely, right, and at a lower cost relative to upgrading the electricity network, then why would you not do that? So we've got no dogma about an approach. I think our view would be, what's the best business case for the UK that ensures the UK remains competitive, is customer driven, customer led, because that's what's going to be needed here, and continues to lead the world. I mean, we should take it based on the numbers, right, and the science. And there are loads of trials going on at the moment around hydrogen. We need to see how those pan out. But certainly there'll be some communities that they don't have a gas connection today. And my argument would be, you don't need one. Actually, we'll give you a nice electricity cable. The market will give you a nice electricity cable. UKPN will ensure that there's sufficient capacity and charge your vehicle at the same time. Right? So I think depending on the environment, the nature of the network is what will determine the solution ultimately.
The next question, it goes back to where we were a little while ago about investment. This person asked, where does the vast investment needed come from? Through the various regulatory regimes, or is it going to be the markets, third-party financing, alternative source? And that is an interesting one. You both said there is money. Well, you particularly still said there is money out there. Well, is it going to be from companies like you guys helping us? If I'm a business, British Gas saying, hey, we'll do this under PPA or whatever. Is it going to be me talking to my FD and say, let's go to the markets and get the funding? Or will it be a mix of various things? Because that is the thing. To get us to net zero, most people say we have to do probably 40 to 50% of the work in this next decade. And that means money coming in now for this infrastructure. So for both of you, let's start with you, Gab. Where will this investment come from, as this person is asking?
There's a difference between where the investment comes from and who ultimately pays for the investment.
Yeah.
Right. So we've learned from coronavirus that a community approach that's science-led, where the government has the courage to invest, will provide a good framework to manage the situation. And so therefore, if we follow that approach, there probably is potentially opportunity for the government to invest and use this as an infrastructure support. Clearly, a lot of major financial institutions are looking to move their environmental credentials forward, and companies like BlackRock are only investing in organisations that are green and are prepared to put the capital in, but they're looking for the returns. In both cases, that money needs to be returned back somehow. The government, either potentially through taxation, unless they're printing the money, but then again, through the economy, that always gets paid back through individuals. And so I think the money is there, the capacity is there for investment. How it gets paid for is the question for me, because Financial institutions are looking for returns.
Yes.
Governments will be looking for paying that back either through taxation or other mechanisms. And if companies like ourselves were to pay for it, obviously that comes out of today's profits and gets repaid by future profits, which come from our customers, our partners. So I think the money's there today, but how it gets paid for and what the mechanisms are and the business model for that, that's the bit I'm not sure. For me to answer that question. I don't know, Saul, what your view is.
Yeah, I think you answered it pretty well. At kind of a macro level, you're spot on. I mean, I think if I sort of answer it maybe at a more micro level, I would say that the UK has a good regulatory setup, has a good legal setup, and therefore it will always rank up there in the top economies to want to invest in by international investors. The challenge that you get at micro level is things like if we were going to go and invest in electric vehicle infrastructure. Now, as a network operator, we don't play in the market. We ensure that the base network is there to enable, charge point operators and others to connect. The issue that I find when I talk to charge point operators is the uncertainty in the revenue streams. We can, they can put in and pay the upfront charges to connect, but are the vehicles going to come in the volumes so that those charges are utilized? So there's a capital hurdle issue here. But then the vehicles won't come unless the infrastructure's there. So there's kind of like, how do you break that chicken and egg, right? And I think there are creative solutions that we're going to need to work through, which says how do we minimize the capital hurdle barrier for investors to give them some certainty in the short term to effectively catalyze the market demand for vehicles. If you don't have a driveway, you want to be able to, as a consumer, be able to see charge points around you to get the confidence to make that shift to an electric vehicle, as an example. So I think there's going to be sort of micro level solutions that we're going to put in place to kind of deal with some of those issues, to give sufficient certainty, particularly where there's low utilization today, recognizing that if you don't do that, the cars might not come in the future. So it's those kind of micro level issues, probably sector by sector, we're going to need to look at, are there any market failures here that need some form of intervention or support? Who's best placed to provide that support, and how best should it be provided and over what period? If we look at other countries, whether it's in Europe or in the US, for example, network operators are doing more, for example, getting involved in the market activities by, for example, socializing the cost of certain connections for a period. That means we all as customers would pay. We haven't done that in the UK because that's not in line with the regulations. But that may be something that we consider in the future if Ofgem or the government believe it's needed to deal with some of the market issues, potentially.
We're pretty much nearly out of time. I want this last question, then we'll do a sum up. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, couldn't get through all the questions, but thank you for sending them in. This is quite an interesting one. So as we transition and accelerate this, do you see a change in the role that you guys will play? Utilities and networks, will they have a different kind of role from being away from commodity sales businesses to becoming more sort of network balancing, demand side flexibility businesses? And that's an interesting one. Both of you, I'd throw them, because you'll have to, the people are going to adjust, the society is going to adjust, your businesses will have to adjust, won't they?
We're thinking way ahead here. So if I think in 10 or 15 years' time, I can see a world where, a bit like if we use telecoms and data, the cable, the LAN provider, the phone is no longer where the revenue stream is, and we're talking about revenue streams around data and content. If you apply that to the energy industry, then there's a potential, and I'm not saying that this will be the case, but there's a potential that what was in the past just a billing of usage in terms of the amount of energy, it could be that we get to a world where if we did get to 2030 and the majority of energy is solar and wind and renewable, that it's about when you use your energy, not how much you use. In which case the bill starts becoming a little bit different. You're not billing for consumption, you're billing for usage, you're billing for how you use the energy. The smart meters may adapt further. And there may be a more interesting dialogue around, well, who pays for the electric vehicle charging? Is it out of the energy bill? Does it go with the car? It's already paid for, as you get a voucher, and either UK Power Networks or British Gas comes in and installs your charging point. It's paid for out of XYZ because you get a deduction in your business rates or whatever. I think the role will change, and instead of it being in, it's the equivalent of who remembers their itemised telephone bills. It's a thing of the past. Yeah. Well, I think the energy bill will look different and the retailer will look different. And our team will look more at what services we're providing, what data we're providing, what insights we're providing, and what applications we bring to the customer, either on their phone or their tablets, that get them engaged in the energy ecosystem.
So briefly for you, because that's an important point, because already the networks are changing. You're becoming from being DNOs to DSOs. That will become something of an element of the balancing and working on the flexibility and demand that people want when they plug into your systems.
Yeah, spot on. And I think I've described it before. In the past, copper was a precious commodity because you basically build your way out of trouble. Now and in the future, data is going to become more of the more important commodity, because by understanding the network, understanding data, understanding customer choices about how they use the network, you can extract greater value from the existing assets, greater utilization. That effectively enables us to keep bills down. So I think copper plus data, right? Definitely. In the past, we used to buy dumb assets, you put them in the ground, you forget about them for 50 years, apart from when they need to be maintained. A lot of our assets now are physical assets, but they've got more embedded IT, more sensors, more monitors in them, that allows us to operate the network at a completely different perspective than we used to operate it before, and therefore be able to do much more local balancing, as you described, and local management. Not done by humans, it's done through algorithms, through machine learning and through AI. And so those types of things we're putting in place now. That's not a news flash today, guys. I mean, just look at the solar numbers. Over 30 gigawatts of solar being connected in the UK. How did that happen? There's been a technological revolution been happening for the last 10 years. That's just going to continue with transport, with heat and everything else. So I would end on a positive by saying, look, should we be confident we can achieve it? I think yes, we can. Look at the track record of us as a country, but we can't be complacent about it. There are some knotty issues that need to be worked through, but we should be confident as a nation, because look at what we've done in the past.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a good way to end. Gab, your final thoughts? We're almost run out of time, but you confident for the future?
Oh, look, I'm always glass half full. As I've said, I was worried that a few months ago, COVID would have stopped people focusing on, terrible things like bushfires in Australia and coral bleaching and other things. But it looks like that we've had a shift, and I'm confident that the world is becoming more community focused. The world is becoming more scientifically led, and I'm hoping that governments have more courage to work together.
Gents, thanks very much. So sorry about the technical issues, but hope you've enjoyed it.